going to talk about something a little bit different, hopefully not totally orthogonal to the discussion. What I've been interested in is how the move to cloud services is kind of a precedent for creating a all-digital software-defined infrastructure that's very different from the infrastructure we have today that's essentially built on a lot of the concepts that were created when the internet was developed, and a lot of the architectural principles based on that. So we have software that can substitute for load balancers, for firewalls, et cetera. The network infrastructure becomes highly elastic, highly interoperable, et cetera. And what I've done to look at this in more detail is essentially set up a matrix model to forecast how much spending there would be by about 20 early adopter industries to see how their spending will affect various parts of the value chain, one of which is cloud service providers, essentially part of the content distribution network for business. And there's basically two things that I'll play up in this presentation. One is that I think that in making this transition, what's happening is that the content service providers are becoming highly dominant in the ecosystem, that the Amazons, in particular Google, Microsoft, and IBM are taking a position where they're capturing far more of the value in this whole system. And that I think that gives them the ability to really amass the technical skills within their organizations so that they could then spread out and vertically integrate. And I think the vertical integration that could happen through the value chain would indicate a way of having much greater power in the marketplace, that rather than being restricted to a certain part of the market as they are now, that if they generate the kind of profits that they are, that this would really let them become far more dominant in the overall ecosystem and probably have a more disruptive effect on the communications systems as we know them today. So let's see here. So I'm going to put up some charts that I've developed from looking at this. Essentially what I've done is model the way in which 20 different industries are likely to move to cloud services over the next 20 years. Then what I've done is, so I've got cloud service provider, the CSP spending, and then total spending for all providers compared here. And what's interesting here is that out of the total, the cloud service providers are more than half in the time period here, both high and low. And so what I'm trying to show is that there, regardless of whether I model this with high or low, the cloud service providers are a very large portion of the overall spending that I'm seeing in the future. And the total spending for this period is not as great as it is in the next one, but I'm getting kind of the same phenomenon as I move forward. And the total spend for 2025 here is about $500 billion. So you're seeing that the revenue of the cloud service providers is going up very dramatically, particularly in the second period. And here I'm comparing cloud service providers and telcos. And so this shows that given both the high and low forecasts that I've made of spending, that the telcos are far behind in becoming cloud service providers or providing services to businesses that need all digital software-defined infrastructure or services based on them. So that's one comparison. The other is that I'm trying to here define how the kind of incestuous relationship between cloud service providers and telcos that are spending on services from other cloud service providers. So in the one case, the telcos are still pretty low, whereas in the case of the cloud service providers, they're making quite substantial spending on other cloud service providers. So this is assuming that this market is going to be highly interdependent, that as companies on the business side move to use more and more kind of software-defined cloud services from things like the cloud service providers, that there will be a lot of cross purchases of service from different players in the marketplace. And then I think this might be the last, but what I can also derive from this is what's happening to employment, and in terms of the overall spending on the services that are based on all digital software-defined infrastructure. I'm showing that again the cloud service provider spending is far larger, maybe 5 or 6 times that of the telcos, but the telcos move to become cloud service providers in a fairly active way in the 2020 to 2025 period, so that the gap or the multiple between the cloud service providers and the telcos is down to about 5 to 1, whereas in the first period it's almost 6 or 7 to 1. But the employment here is quite interesting, because what I've done is I've made a 3-step forecast. One is to measure how much money is being spent on basic cloud services that are not necessarily all digital or software defined. Then to look at how much of the spending it would be related to moving to an all software defined infrastructure, and then counting the offset that would be happening as we turn off traditional infrastructure that would offer cloud services with kind of a hardware base, so that if we're in an infrastructure that has hardware-based load balancers and firewalls, and where you would have early types of cloud services. So I've netted out the employment offset. So this is a net gain in employment, and it's essentially 800,000 jobs in the second period of the decade I'm looking at, and roughly 500. So that's like 1.4 million directly, probably with a multiplier effect. It's probably close to 4 million new jobs over a 10-year period or so. So essentially, I think looking at this as a transition to an infrastructure type that has the potential to also be very linked into the video market, because I see a lot of examples of various industries using video very actively, and I think that as younger people take over in those industries, that they're going to want to do things with video very actively. I mean, I know probably 5-10 years ago, one of the research people at a pharmaceutical company that I knew said that he wanted to run his entire laboratory from his mobile device without looking at anything. All the video would come into him, whether it's wet lab, whether it's computer generated, whatever, and all the controls would be visible. He could essentially change everything. And now, I mean, I'm hearing about things like surgeons are recording all of their operations in 8K video, that you have companies like John Deere or Caterpillar that are merging satellite video with ground level imaging in order to go through digital analytics and tell farmers where they should be running their harvesting equipment or their planting equipment, etc. So we're seeing much more video integrated into the business world, and I think this is giving companies like Amazon, Google, IBM, Microsoft the ability to really handle lots of video. I mean, all of Netflix is now pretty much over Amazon. And so I think that this kind of management and the skills to be on the cutting edge of storage and networking management with highly software-defined systems gives some of these actors the opportunity to really play a role in where the video ecosystem is going in the future. Okay. All right. If any, I could take questions, or we can
Okay,
go.
no, we'll go to tuna first, and then we'll
Okay,
take questions.
that's
Hold on.
Should you
Thank-
slides or? No,